Good evening, guten Tag, Talafalava. This is Dr. Sanu Brown speaking to my beloved Knights and Chiefs of the 150 Days War Program, and also to my Snowcane Club congregation. Welcome to this evening's so-called special announcement or special preaching, and also to my and everyone else that's part of my CKCTV Facebook. Welcome. Thank you all for tuning in once again this evening, being the 18th of March 2022. Now, this is a very significant day, people. That's correct. The 18th of March, because it reminds me of the 18th of July, 2008, when I got given the order of supervision by Mr. Weller or Mr. Anthony Shaw. That's correct. Who is now being revealed, has been confirmed, is an associate of the MMB, the Red Demon, and also an associate of the KKK, the White Demon. That's correct. So today we're going to talk about a serial rapist and serial stalker. That's correct. And today I solved my case. Well, the case, actually, this case is going to be reopened when it comes to, to the courts via restraining order. And that is, today I discovered I'm not only a victim of rape, that's correct, or sexual assault by a police officer during a lockup at a local police station not a local police station here, but at the Wellington Watch House police station on the 24th of June 2003. And hence the reason why, that's correct. Also, other harmful events followed thereafter. During that arrest, I do remember now being, I don't remember actually being, what happened, but I do now can confirm confidently say that I was subjected to a violation, to a sexual assault or rape during that lockup via a police arrest regarding a willful trespass with the University of Wellington, or the law faculty. That's correct. And I believe that would have been the third arrest of willful trespass, because I breached the order. The trespass noticed this deliberately on the grounds of the law faculty, that's correct, the university, as a protest to apply my civil and political. So it was a protest. And I never expected in my wildest dream that I would end up being a victim of rape. That's correct. So the police officer is actually a serial rapist. He's a serial rapist, and he's a danger, and is a real danger. But it looks like he's more a danger to this victim than most victims, than most people out there, because, well, he's indecent. He is very, very dangerous because he's a white male. He's a Caucasian. He's a Caucasian white male. That's right, police officer. Now, I can only vaguely recall what he looked like because he was the one that processed me, that's correct, with another officer on that evening or that afternoon, about later after 4 o'clock, that's correct, in the afternoon, closer to 5, to process me through the so-called, the usual, fingerprinting and taking pictures. That's correct. So I never expected in my wildest dream that is actually the serial stalker, and the serial stalker now that's been confirmed, that has been applying criminal harmful protocols amounting, connected to that local Red Demon organization, criminal organization, and also on behalf of their KKK associate. So he could be a KKK associate. We've yet to confirm that at the courts, but it looks like he's definitely connected to the Red Demon local organization, gang organization, that's correct. And that he did apply, he probably thought I was a Maori, that's correct. Because like most police officers who have those bad connections, as I've learned at this address, they do engage in sexual, favors or sexual, sex with gang members, wives and partners and spouses. That's right, you name it, that's correct, they do. They actually do. So if they are associate of criminal organizations like the MMB or the KKK, then they would. That's correct. It is part of the culture. It is part of what they do. I mean, I'm not involved with any, no one's ever spoken to me about these sort of things. I have just I have a gift. As I said, I'm an ordained natural noble pastor. That's meek. Childlike, that's correct. So now you can understand what happened during that police arrest was that on the 26th of June, like 2 days later, I had a reaction on some sort of ear infection that not only my whole face was swollen, that's correct. I had pus coming out of my ears, that's correct. And I knew that it was unnatural, that it was definitely induced by some sort of drug, that's correct. And not only that, I was now in agony, in pain all over. That's correct. But you see, the following morning, I did feel, after the arrest on 25th of June, I appeared in court, in the Wellington court. And I certainly did not feel all right when I woke up in the morning because it felt like something had happened, that's correct, overnight. And it wasn't until about the 26th or until later that, the following day, that I made this realization that, I feel funny down there in my lower part, private area. That's correct. But of course, it certainly felt like somebody had done something, but, I didn't feel any pain of any sort, but I definitely felt drugged, felt like I'd been drugged. And it wasn't until by the 26th, which was Friday, 26th or Saturday or Friday, that week, 2003, that I suddenly had this ear infection, that's correct, that affected not only my head, that's right, I was in pain all over, I was in agony, that I had to seek medical attention. But I definitely felt like I'd been subjected to torture, I'd definitely been subjected to torture. And it was definitely via the police, that's police brutality. But this is the officer, this is the culprit that I'm now talking about, he's the Mr. Rapist. Mr. Rapist, if you listen to this video, that's correct, I suggest I'm giving you one last chance to go down to the police station, make a statement, that's correct, and what? And confess to this crime that you committed upon this noble, that's correct. Because I'm telling you right now, you deserve the death penalty. For what you did, that's correct. You are a rapist, a serial rapist, that's correct. And it's probably not the only time you've done that, that's correct, Mr. Rapist. You've done that many times. I wouldn't be surprised if there's so many victims out there that over the years that you've taken advantage. You know how serious it is for you to wear that the police uniform and show off? It's quite a prestigious position to be in, that's correct. But when you've got that kind of power to abuse, well, I'm not surprised at all, that's correct, that you're an overdue offender, like Mr. Prick. Except you're even worse, that's correct. Because now you think I'm your property? Is that why you apply all these criminal protocols, harmful protocols, not only inside at this address, via these son of a bitches here, especially this one here next door, the son of a bitch next door, Mr. Brute? Oh, I wouldn't be surprised now, Mr. Rapist, that's great. So I guess you were so clever and so cunning. And then the next move that you made, that's correct, after the so-called torturing of me in secret, via that police arrest, that's correct, when you of course you try to camouflage it, disguise and cover up your so-called criminal offense, that's right. You are a violent offender who should have been arrested a long time ago, but because you're a member, that's correct, nobody would dare cross you or do anything to you because you know what you would do to them, that's correct, if you are KKK. Does that sound about right? And then, of course, on the 26th of August 2003, I think it was a court appearance. I think it was a court appearance there in Wellington, that's correct, I record. And I got given a hot drink there at the courts. And of course, as we were leaving to get in our car, to leave to go home that day, you got a nosebleed. That was when the first nosebleed occurred. And it was bad, By the end of that day, I not only ended up in calling the emergency, that's correct, the ambulance, but that was probably another torture. It was the same torture, it's called a criminal harmful protocol, as I recall now. Well, now that I've learned a little bit what they're about here, because they've been teaching, that's exactly what you've been doing, Mr. Rapist, through these harmful so-called friends of yours here that I refer to as son of a bitches, that's correct. You've been teaching your so-called criminal harmful protocols. Oh, you're not that smart. I am very smart indeed. and you've been listening in, all right, and you've also been coming into this flat, I wouldn't be surprised. But you see, the minister ought not to cover your tracks, you know. You are traceable, that's correct. So there's been a lot of dictating to my privileges and my so-called life in general. You've been overruling my decision-making, haven't you? Going behind my back with the community mental health. Hey, if they should ever track down, obtain all the telecommunications, they will discover that there's been this strange police officer, that's correct, that has been ringing us, say, whether it be work and income, Upper Hutt, or the remote client unit, that's correct, or Upper Hutt Cozy Club, or in fact, a lot of the so-called organization and agencies where this poor victim has been going to, there's just been this this serial stalker, that has been stalking her and telling them things like that she's sick, don't listen to her or ignore what she says because she's sick with, some bullshit urotomania, when in actual fact, I'm sorry, Mr. Rapist, but your so-called running, on the run as a fugitive has come to an end today. Yeah, it's time to take responsibility. It's time to face up. That's correct. It's time to face that you've got a problem, that you're a very sick bastard. A very sick son of a bitch. That's correct. And if it wasn't for the your white skin color, and the fact that, you are respected and you are accepted by the police force, regardless of the so-called indiscretions that you do, but your arbitrary dictatorships, they need to drop. You're not I'm not your property. I'm actually a victim who should have been what? Who should have been protected by the system, by the New Zealand Police Force, by the Police Commissioner, by the ministers, whether it be the Minister of Social Welfare, Social Development, or the Minister of Housing, Kaingaora, or even the Minister of Social Justice. But you have, it seems like they have actually given you a lot of powers and rooms to abuse your powers. Who are you, this mystery so-called police officer? So you're the one that's been driving all the way to Whiteman's Valley. That's correct. Every time I left my address, you went in there. That's correct. Oh, my mother will never say. I guess that's why my mother said, "Oh, don't worry about locking up your so-called." That's right. The back cottage door. You don't need to lock it. Just leave it. Leave it like that. Leave it open. Obviously, because there is a serial stalker. It's called Mr. Rapist in the form of police uniform that was going to go and do whatever he was up to. Now, you're doing the same thing here at this address. Yeah. So I gathered. Do you know how serious that is? If all those associates were, because I'm going to summon them, that's correct, bring them on the restraining order, even this so-called son of a bitch of yours next door who is your spy, your loyal spy. Has he been having sex with your wife as a reward? Oh, I wouldn't be surprised now. Because that's right. Have you been giving him money? Oh, I wouldn't be surprised either. Hey, if we have to, that's right. So you better confess. You better go down to the police station, make a statement, and declare your so-called crimes. That's correct. Because every other asshole and son of a bitch in the system that are associates, they cannot continue on this so-called crusade of yours of covering up your white stinky ass. That's correct. You know what I mean? Oh, you got blood on your hands, all right? Did I bleed when you violated this victim? I wouldn't be surprised, because I don't know why you need to bleed me 3 times. That's correct. So the first nosebleed, and during that the very first serious nosebleed, that's correct, that lasted over 6 hours, from the 26th of August, that is actually from you, isn't it? Yes, it is. So only KKK members would do those kind of harmful protocols. That's correct. Except that one comes from your red demon, from your red connection. That's correct. You are one hell of a evil, badass cop, all right. I don't know how ever did you make it through the police force, but the fact that your colleagues and the police station, that's great, and so-called sergeants and the rest of them could actually cover up your white nigger ass, eh? Oh, they would also get the bullet to the head from the Nazi soldiers. Do you know that I've got more rights now? For the so-called Nazi soldiers to come and give you the death penalty and take you out? You are a demon. I'm sorry, but you're a sick man. No, I ain't sick. I'm on the job seeker, by the way. You going around and dictating to my, to my privileges in my life. Don't mean that your authority. Don't mean that you've got a right to do that, buddy. Especially if you're a criminal, especially if you're an overdue offender that's overdue for apprehension, arrest, and also to be locked away for good in the jailbird. That's right. So do the right thing. Do the right thing. If I were you, I'd put my resignation in. If you can't want, if you don't want to be arrested, and charged and processed like what you've been doing all these years, because you can't handle being called an offender, let alone being convicted, having a rapist. That's correct. Reputation on your criminal record, a first charge, is it? The first of many charges. You know what I mean? It is time, Mr. Serial Stalker, serial rapist. That's great, and I will refer to you as Mr. Rapist. So as long as you're on the loose, that's right, like a loose cannon, you will forever be referred to by the victim as Mr. Rapist. That's correct. And Mr. so-called Stalker. Oh, the mystery has been unraveled today, indeed. That you are actually the culprit that everybody else has been protecting. Even that lawyer, that order of supervision, that's a criminal harmful protocol. Yeah, I know that. It's from the criminal organization, the red one. So everyone has been pulling their string, pulling their weight, that's correct, covering your white nigger ass, that's correct. Indeed. So who are you? You definitely ain't no king if you think that. My gosh, you're starting to behave like one, aren't you? Now you're starting to think, oh, wow, that you could be a king, really? The Chiefy Jibam? No, I don't think so. Chiefy Jibam is far more decent and noble than your trashy white nigger loose ass prick. It's correct. So if I were you, I better own up because you know what? I don't suffer from erotomania. That was a good one. That was your so-called, that's right. Man, it's amazing what you can do when you've got white skin color. When you want to cover up, how some criminals want to cover up their so-called tracks. And they go through, and they pull all the strings. Man, you really are a badass cop, all right? You deserve the bullet in the head for all that you do. That's correct. So what would happen now? They will have to arrest you there at the courts. That's correct. Because it looks like you are the culprit that has been doing a lot of dictating to my privileges, whether it be apart Cozy Club, here at the so-called local, working income. Oh, that's right. Then after the first nosebleed, then you went to Stuart Mum. That's correct, and gave me that so-called long banning, got me banned there for 2 years. That's right. They covered all 10 branches of the Wellington region. And then, of course, you went right ahead. That's correct. You did another orchestration via the lawyer. That's correct, which got me, that's right, drugged for over 7 years. Now, see what happens when a serial killer, a serial stalker and a serial rapist gets desperate. That's correct, because he's trying to cover his tracks. He doesn't want to be caught, so he's got to make it worse. He's got to make it worse for the victim. So it's like one pile of torture upon, one pile of brick. That's right, one pile of shit. One pile of harm, torture, brutality upon another one, but they're all criminal harmful protocols from a criminal organization. That's great. Welcome to the real world, Mr. Rapist. I wonder how you've been doing. Have you been sleeping well? I didn't think so either, because you're constantly screening and monitoring this victim. Do you know that you've been seen driving around? Man, you're finally out being caught. On this day, it has been revealed that you're the culprit. You're the serial stalker and the serial rapist. That's correct. Who has been going through this criminal organization's members and their associates and other people. That's correct, to cover your tracks. But hey, we now know. I wouldn't be surprised if you rang up, or say another police officer on your behalf. That's correct. Discreetly rang up ADT security, like Constable, Nielsen? That's correct. who came and put her business card under my door here. Oh, there's been a lot of this, a lot of so chaotic. Nightmare, all right, to wake up and realize that I'm actually a victim, a sexual assault, a rapist, a rape victim, that's correct. And also a stalk victim. And also a torture victim, a tortured victim. And a victim that's in slavery as well, or that has been targeted by this so-called, serial stalker. So all those associates that you went through to dictate to my privileges, man, you are good. Oh, he is good, all right. He sure is. But he's a badass. And he sure deserves, a hiding. But he deserves the death penalty, a bullet to the head, more. If I had a choice, that's great. I would wish that you be chopped up to pieces and fed to the sharks. And I'm sure that the sharks will have a good time teaching you a lesson. That's great, you son of a bitch. That's great. You are a disgusting son of a bitch, all right? For every victim out there, man, I wouldn't even want to talk to you, especially if you're a rapist. How dare you speak to the community mental health or that you get somebody on your behalf? Hey, I am not your property, buddy. That's correct. You got a wife, you got children, and you got the nerve, that's correct, to dictate to my privileges? Do you think that you can persuade those ministers to be on your side when you're actually an offender? Do you think it can go on? How long are you going to go on with this lie? That's correct, covering up your white nigger ass. That's correct. So what would happen if it's just as well I'm not married here in New Zealand, or I have children? My God, he would dictate to my husband's privileges and his life. They're at work. He would dictate to my children's so-called privileges. They're at school. He would probably stalk them as well. Can you imagine if I was getting ready for my wedding date? That's correct. Because all this time I didn't know that there was actually a serial stalker. That's correct. That was stalking you all this time and harming you through his associates and drugging you and torturing you. That's great. And teaching you lessons and trying to discipline you using their criminal protocols, which has nothing to do with me, to be honest. You're a badass, all right? Man, they should hammer you. That's great. But I hope you're going to get it when they chuck you in the jailbird. I don't know why they feel sorry for somebody. You're an indecent son of a bitch. That's correct. Can you imagine I'm getting ready to walk down the aisle? That's right. Say if I was married here in New Zealand. My God, he would stop. He would do anything to stop the wedding from happening. That's correct. So that means I'd have to pay for somebody to kidnap him. That's correct. Put a tape and tie a rope around him and lock him in to keep an eye and lock him there until I said my I do at the altar and walked out, Mrs. Such and Such. Yeah, Mrs. Wright. Mrs. Angel. That's correct. Or Mrs. Phillips. You know what I mean? Oh, you're a badass cop, all right? You're a greedy son of a bitch. So tell me, I mean, is it not enough? If your wife's not enough, is she not satisfying you? That you got to behave that way? Hey, don't be a control freak, because you certainly are a maniac. You certainly is. Well, I can see the violent streak of yours. You're really violent. Did you know that? You seriously have got a problem. That's correct. You see how you come here and think that you can enter my private spaces as though you own the so-called. That's correct. You're rude, buddy. I hope your family actually disown you out of their family. I'm sure your family are not all rapists and serial killers, serial stalkers. That's correct. Well, welcome to the real world. This is the 18th of March, by the way. That's correct. Oh, all those controlling. I was wondering why I was getting all those controls. So you're the one that's been telling Mr. Willard to ignore my so-called communications and my letters and whatnot. Are you the one? I wouldn't be surprised now. Are you the one that tells everybody to ignore what I say to them or my contacts and whatnot? Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. Man, you got a lot of control, all right? I wonder what he's saying to them. To have that kind of power to abuse. You know what? You ought to be careful throwing your weight around and thinking you can dictate to other people's and meddling in other people's so-called, life, single lives. Hey, just because you violated me, you you had no right. You had no right to cross those boundaries, and you deserve to be arrested. But also, you now deserve the death penalty for every other harm that you've dished to me. That's correct. You not only controlled my life, that's correct, my access to goods and services via work and income with Stuart Mann for about 8 years. That's correct. At remote client unit. And now you want to what? What the F is going on with you and that lawyer? Don't tell me that Mr. Rape, that the so-called Mr. Willow would actually condone your harmful brutality or barbaric savagery. You're a ravager. That's correct. You're a defiler. You're a betrayer. That's correct. You're a loser. Get it out. Get over it. Get over it. You don't own this bird. Somebody does. But it certainly ain't you. That's for sure. That's correct. You already got your bird, you greedy son of a bitch. That's correct. But don't think that you can dictate to my family either. You need to stop your arbitrary dictatorships. That's correct. Whether it be the president of the so-called Red Demon or some other person, you need to stop doing that, buddy, because one of these days somebody is going to kill you. It's called karma. Welcome to the real world. That's correct. When did you think that you were... you probably thought he was never going to be caught. Well, I'm sorry. You have been caught. So-called a nigger by the toe. A white nigger has been caught by the toe. And he is a genius, all right? He's brilliant. And what he does, and the fact that he's able to get everybody else to dictate to your privileges and control your life through his so-called arbitrary dictatorships, but through that lawyer. Mr. Willow is, well, am I to presume that Mr. Willow is also a Mr. Rapist? Oh, I would not be surprised. You see, that is what all criminal organizations are, a bunch of rapists. That's correct. That's the reality. I'm sorry. That is the reality. Now, do you think that my family would accept you, Mr. Rapist, to be part of my so-called meek royal family? No, hell no. My brother would be like, oh, fuck that. That's great. He would want to kick you. That's great. But he would want to kill you. And all my sisters would want to give you a hiding if you ever cross their family. That's great. If you ever come, oh, hell no. Who is the head? That's Mr. Rapist. Right. Get me a gun. That's right. Get the fuck out. The other one that's also been dictating through my Facebook. You got the nerve, buddy. You got the nerve. That's correct. Do you think that sexual assault victims like to be stalked by serial rapists like you and serial stalkers? And you use this son of a bitch next door and all these so-called losers inside this building to harm me, to torture me inside this building? You got the bloody nerve. And who the hell are you? Who the fuck are you? So I'm guessing that you're the same son of a bitch that also buried my very best friend, Mr. Warren Baker. Oh, I'm not surprised because you're a very jealous son of a bitch. I know that. I know. I went out one day and I came back and I must have left and I suddenly realized the reason why I got tortured that day when I got back, or the very next all night when I got the same pains on my feet. Because they had contaminated, I think, your food or drink to give you the same torture. And it was because the arsehole came in and probably saw the picture, that's correct, of my honey, that's correct, that was on the holy altar, that's correct. The picture, well, not quite that picture, but another similar picture with that particular gentleman, that's right, that I was dating. And it was on the wall, that's correct, on my so-called holy altar. And he probably went berserk. He went berserk when he saw his picture, that's correct. And thought, well, I better torture her. That she blah, blah, blah. But I'm thinking, who the F are you? Do you know that it's amazing how God can, my guardian angel and the archangel now reveal to me? That's correct. And it's only because the dragging has stopped, that's correct, and I've been protecting myself. Now I have to nail down that partition, that's correct. And the camera, well, the camera still needs to be reconnected. And I guess you're the same one that's right. You let this son of a bitch next door do what he likes here, right? So I guess you're the same son of a bitch that also removed his trespass notice so that it wouldn't be filed in the system. Oh, you are good, all right. It's no wonder my so-called complaints have been ignored by the police station or the complaint process. Oh, you are good, all right, Mr. Rapist. You certainly are good. I hope one of these days that you don't worry, because the Nazi soldiers are coming in the future. And you will have to contend with them. And every other police officer of the New Zealand Police Force will have to contend with them as well. But if I were them, I'd step aside and just hand you over to the so-called Nazi soldiers, because it's my right. It's my right. And every other associate of yours that has harmed me, right, and with the president and that organization, you are all going. That's correct. Because after all, you've all been cursed. You've all been cursed. The seal of the death penalty is upon you, and you've been cursed to the lake of fire. So that means you don't have any other hope. You're just waiting for D-Day. That's correct. So you've been sealed. You've been marked. That's correct. You've been branded. You've been marked with the death angel. And the death angel is waiting for the date of, yeah, that's right, for the date of goodbye. Goodbye. That's right. Goodbye. That's correct. And then what? Goodbye. That's correct. That's what it's waiting for. So if I were anybody, I wouldn't bother talking to anybody that has got the seal of the death penalty. And all they were just waiting for the graves to open up and swallow them into it. That's great. Mass grave. That's what you get. That's what you get. I could easily, and when I file my restraining order, I'm leaving your country. But I don't ever want that serial Mr. Rapist, the police officer, that's correct, on the 24th of June 2003, to follow me, this arbitrary dictatorship, to follow me over to Rhode Island, because that's where I intend to immigrate to, with my asylum application. Well, you definitely need now. You definitely qualify for an asylum application. You consider all those criminal, harmful protocols, that's correct, that came your way. Your cousin's family took advantage of you, and certainly took advantage. My poor dad, that's correct. It's no wonder he got cancer. It's no wonder he fainted a lot of the time at work, unexplained. He definitely was drugged, that's correct. Was given some sort of, and it was all because the police officer, Mr. Rapist, didn't get his way. So when Mr. Rapist didn't get his way, that's correct, and his so-called maniac friends, who were all wanting to, a taste of this so-called nice, juicy, that's right, single free agent, they would deal to your dad. They would either deal to your dad or they would deal to you. That's correct. That's how it was. Man, you guys are sick, all right? You sick son of a bitches. Do you know I sound sane? Oh, I ain't sick. You will never win over this noble, but you will never, ever come near me. Do you hear me? Because I will want to kill you. That's correct. Because that's what the guardian angel intends to do to you if you ever come near. But I'll probably pick you up and chuck you down the stairs and chuck hot water at you. That's correct. Because you deserve it. People like you don't deserve any respect of any sort, especially if you behave indecently and barbarically and like a savage. That's correct. Rude. You are rude. Well, at least I'll say this. At least the swearing is forgivable. My Lord doesn't give a damn what I say, because the guardian angel, well, he's the one that backs me up, and I can say what I like. That's correct. And victims have more rights than offenders. So there you go. That's another thing, buddy. So if you ever think that I'm going to die, that you're going to kill me, you wish, you dreamer. You've been trying that. I know. 3 nosebleed, eh? The one that happened in 2006, around about November, 15th of November onwards, until about the 30th of November, was probably the worst one. But even the first one was just as bad. That's correct. Really bad, really bad. Man, you and your buddies, you and your friends, your crimmies, your criminal friends or associates, you all deserve, well, you got the death penalty now. That's right. Dumbos, dumb fucks, that's great, that's what you get. So don't you think that the ministers are going to cover your smelly little asses, your smelly white nigger asses or brown asses, that's great, because they ain't going to cover it, because even they might end up dead as well. Do you know that? So you compromised, you put everybody's life at risk. That's correct. And I wonder about those innocent souls that were taken, like Sarah, Polie, like Ola. That's correct. And I'm learning now that when these people don't like, what people like yourself or other people, especially if they were from overseas, immigrated from other countries, especially if they consider themselves as foreigners, despite that they are New Zealand Kiwi citizens for a very long time. And even when they're born here, you know what? They still get dealt to for what we say. Maybe you shouldn't listen in on people's private conversations. Has it ever occurred to you that you've got no right to do that? That it's also criminal? But I mean, they being criminals, they don't know any better. That's correct. And that's why you think you know it all. You know the problem when people listen into people's private conversations and read their private texts? That gives you a lot of power to abuse other people psychologically. That's correct. It does. You end up controlling other people's psychologically. You misuse that information for intimidating them, but also bullying them by saying sarcastic comments and ironic comments that actually what? That actually harms them psychologically. That's correct. But when you apply these long-banding decisions, buddy, to control me, like psychologically and emotionally and whatnot, and you dictate to my Facebook when you got no right to, you got the nerve. That's correct. Mr. Rapist, you will forever be known as Mr. Rapist. You will never be forgiven. You will never be forgiven. Hey, I'm a natural noble pastor. It's too late. You can't forgive them. My Lord doesn't forgive anybody who has harmed me and grieved the Holy Spirit for such a long time. But it also has cursed the Holy Spirit by giving you those long-banding decisions. That's correct. And all those so-called bullshit lying decisions. That all are criminal protocols. That's correct. Harmful protocols from that red demon and white demon organizations. Well, now you know. That's correct. Where all those decisions come from. And who is the culprit? What, Mr. Rapist, see you in court. But I really don't want to see you in court because you will be mentioned anyway as an associate. But looks like you're an overdue offender on the run. But you got to stop running now. You've got to face up to your responsibility. But you are a very sick man who needs professional help. And if they don't stop your arbitrary dictatorships, somebody's got to the Nazi soldiers will come and put you out of your misery and put you to rest. That's correct. Because that's what they need to do. Now, as for the rest of the so-called people of Aotearoa, that's correct. I've given you my Archangel Warren and the Guardian Angel have given you, and also myself and Her Majesty Queen Samara have all given your country a new name, a new title. Aotearoa. That's correct. Meaning, no, it's not the long white cloud. No, it's not the long white shit. That's not what it means. I guess you could interpret it that way. Well, this is a junkyard. And it is full of so-called, dead man bones, this country. It is full of sex addicts, and it's full of people that are sick with incest. You know that incest is a common sickness in all criminal organizations? Yeah, because they do have sex with their children. It's called rape, and it's called sexual abuse and molestation. In that form, in that nice form. Very, very, that's correct, deadly. What it really means, Aotearoa, if you want, this is from a noble's perspective, of course, on a natural noble pastor, on a positive note, what it really means is the long white tails. That's correct. The long white tails. That's what it means. Aotearoa. The long white tails. Beautiful, isn't it? That's correct. Well, you will never know what really that means, but by the long white tails. That's correct. Well, I hope now that the victim has spoken. The victim has spoken. That the Minister of Social Development, please stop all arbitrary dictatorships from Mr. Rapist. There at the work and income of WINS or any of the so-called, that's right, anything to do with work and income. Do you mind, your Honourable Minister of Social Development, please stop any arbitrary dictatorships. I would really appreciate, this is the victim speaking, she would really appreciate that very much if you could stop that, whether it be from Mr. Rapist, the police officer that I'm talking about, or any other police officer in the New Zealand Police Force who have got the criminal connections to that red and white demon, or even to that lawyer in Oriental Bay. I would really appreciate that very much. And the other minister is Minister of Justice. Do you mind also stopping all arbitrary dictatorships that amount to criminal harmful protocols from Mr. Rapist, the same police officer, and Mr. Anthony Shaw, the Mr. Willow, that's correct, in regards to their order of supervision, where they falsified, where they made false accusations, where they also set up this victim so that they could control her psychologically and also through other people via an order of supervision, which they have been able to do so in the system. I would really appreciate that very much, Minister of Justice, because I am now 49. I am still single, that's correct, although I am getting ready to that's right, to have a new life in Rhode Island. So, and I deserve it, and I deserve to be happy. And I and my Holy Ghost children, that's correct, 6 Holy Ghost children, and my Archangel Warren and the Guardian Angel, we are leaving your country. So before anything else, I would like to be left in peace. I would like to enjoy the quiet enjoyment of my tenancy. So if you don't mind, Minister of Justice, please stop all arbitrary dictatorships via any police officer of the New Zealand Police Force, especially Mr. Rapist, who actually has been dictating to my privileges and also overruling my decision-making through other officials in the system, if you don't mind. I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Now, as for the so-called Minister of Housing, I would also like you, Honourable, to do the same, to follow suit, because I, being the sovereign head of Crystal Kingdom Church TV, Crystal Kingdom Independent State, would like also to request that all arbitrary dictatorships be denied and stopped effectively, whether it be, and especially from Mr. Rapist, who is a police officer who committed a crime, who is actually an offender, who's well overdue. He needs to be arrested, and he's a very sick man. He's been doing a lot of harms to this victim, and also a lot of denying of my privileges in the system, and a lot of hacking as well by his so-called criminal associates like this son of a bitch next door. I would really appreciate if you could stop that, especially the lawyer in Oriental Bay. That I am not their property. They wish. They're dreamers. They're dreamers. They need to use their own slaves, but they need to learn to respect my boundaries. You know, I have a tolerance, and right about now, I have zero tolerance. And I don't need some so-called, control freaks like that. Men who are married already and are already attached to try and hijack me, but to try and think that they can assert some sort of sovereignty, some sort of property right over this property, convert me to a chattel, let alone to a sex slave or some slave. That's correct. I don't appreciate that. Thank you very much, Minister of Housing. Would appreciate that. All ministers of the government of New Zealand, to please stop all those, because I am 49 years old and I damn well have got a right to be left alone, to enjoy my full privileges without any impingements from anybody, let alone without any controls or any harms or tortures, whatnot, or cruelties. I most certainly do not need some commoners to dictate to me and tell me how to run my church TV, excuse me. So if you don't mind, that's great. I hope you all have a nice evening. But from now on, be out for the report any stalkings or any dictatings in the system that comes from Mr. Rapist, the police officer, or any other police officer in the system. If I make complaints to the police officer, which it might be 111, 105 online, or any other forms of complaints, they should not be treated as like a mental health issue kind of thing. Stop doing that. Don't be stupid. I'm on a job seeker, for God's sake. I'm healed, I'm whole, and I do not have a mental disorder, thank you. No, I don't. And I'll tell you I'll say this. You know, a lot of you that are married, and I mean police officers or any other so-called professionals, you do not want somebody to overrule your wife's decision-making. That's correct. And you would not want your wives to be ignored, their complaints to the police to be ignored, let alone be treated as kind of like a mental health issue. Do you know what I mean? No, you wouldn't like that. No, trust me, you wouldn't. You would be disgusted, and you would expect them to arrest the culprits or apprehend the offenders, rather than saying that she needs to go and talk to a counselor to kind of like overlook, but also to let the so-called crimmies, walk off free. That's correct. That's not right. That's That just encourages violence against women and domestic violence to what? To continue on the cycle in this country. Hey, I'm a noble, and I don't deserve that kind of rubbish. And I most certainly do not need that kind of serial stalker to go on doing what he's doing. It needs to stop now, New Zealand. You need to do something about it. New Zealanders, all New Zealanders, take heed from this so-called preaching this evening. You need to stop son of a bitches like that, but you need to have them arrested and reported to the police. Regardless, even if it goes on record, on file. Because one day, the same offenders will commit even bigger and worse crimes, and then at least you've got a record on file to say that, hey, they should have what? They should have done something about it. Now look at it. It's gotten worse. In fact, that's exactly what happened to that police officer, because everybody has been feeling sorry for his so-called white nigger ass when he's indecent, and also because they scared the shit out of him. They are scared. That's correct. Don't mean that you're going to let somebody like that, do that? Continue on behaving that way. No wonder I have got a right to order the Nazi soldiers to come and take him out. And the rest of all his so-called son of a bitches that are harming people. That's why we have laws and common laws, so that we could be protected. That's correct. But if nobody's there to protect our interests, except we've got to go to a counsellor to convert it to a mental health issue when, hey, I don't have a mental health issue. The last time, I don't even qualify for independent allowance that I used to. Because ACC said, you're 5%. Your mental injury is only 5%. You do whatever you're doing, great. But when this serial stalker, that's right, and the serial rapist are constantly on your back, and it's because he's scared, or it's because I don't know, there's something wrong with the man that's correct. But that's what happens when the police officer don't arrest those sort of offenders. They're maniacs. They need to be arrested. Otherwise, they'll target the victim again. Oh, here we go again. That's great. And it's going to be harmed again. Or somebody in her family is going to be harmed. Well, let's hope my brother, who's a police officer there in Burupara, is not going to be targeted. He's not going to be targeted. That's because when this so-called serial offender, serial rapist, and serial stalker doesn't get what he wants, he harms the victim. So there you go. Now, New Zealand, that's great. If you call yourself, if this country is beautiful as it appears, as people rave about, then you need to stop offenders like that, evil son of a bitches like that. You need to stop them on their tracks. Our communities are not safe, especially for me. It might be safe for a lot of you out there because you haven't been targeted and you haven't been violated. But your children could be the next one. Did you know that? That's great. Or even your grandchildren. So don't think that you're safe at all. You're not during COVID-19. It's no wonder these people have been overlooked and allowed it to do what they do because of the police officer and their connection to the so-called elite. The elite are not good people at all. No, they're not. They need to stop allowing those sort of things. Just because I say things about the treaty and just because I don't accept it, don't mean that you can teach me lessons, let alone torture the fuck out of me. Because you all wouldn't like to be tortured either if the Nazi soldiers came. Only it would be justified because it was the only thing that's correct that the victim could do was to stand up, but to raise her arm and say, go to it, Nazi soldiers. Her Majesty Queen Snowbound has given her full authority. Our Lord has given her his full authority. And it looks like the divine reversal prayers, they work. And on this day, I give to God be the glory, to God be the glory. I dedicate this so-called preaching this evening to God, and to my Lord, and to my Queen. And also to my dad, may his soul rest in peace, may he rest in peace. And also to my beloved best friend, Mr. Warren Baker, whose life was cut short at the age of 59 by the so-called son of a bitches that I've been talking about inside this so-called posting this evening, or this preaching this evening. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen.